any regrets for the meeting. I believe that is Director Jones and Director Xavier. And next, if there are any conflicts of interest. As I've seen. Motion.
The 16th today.
Chair Mohammed would look like the man's the agenda.
That's definitely the person.
Yeah. Missed some other expected. Let's put the motion first in discussion.
Motion second, discussion.
And then you vote. Thank you. So is there a motion to adopt the agenda as presented? Yeah, Director Romelli in a second. Thank you. And is there any discussion on the matter? Chair Abu-Rashid. But
I'd like to propose a amendment or to the motion. The amendment would be to end the meeting at 5:45 PM today, and any business not attended to being pushed to the next meeting.
this would be in order to get people out of the meeting in time to go onto the bus, I presume?
That is indeed correct.
Okay, so would anyone like to second that amendment? Director Sloan, now to vote on the amended agenda. Can I get a motion, the amended agenda? Director Sloan, can I get a seconder, please? Director Baldinelli, any discussion? Any, now for voting, any objections? Any abstentions? All those in favor? Motion passes 0-0-10. Now to vote on the new agenda. Can I get a motion for that? Director Baldinelli, Director Russo seconds. Any discussion? For voting, any objections? Any abstentions? All those in favor? Passes 0-0-10. Sorry for the delay with that, the confusion. Now moving on to the adoption of the meeting minutes for the September 25th and October 2nd meetings. Oh, my fault. Thank you for clarifying that. Adoption of the consent agenda, as well as GP2E and GP2K. Can I get a motion that the board of directors adopt the agendas as presented? Director Sloan, seconded by Director Hamilton. Any discussion? Voting, oh yeah, sorry.
You only have the monitoring report for GP2A right now, or GP2E right now. You don't have
Okay,
GP2K.
not that, okay, so I will rephrase, can I get a motion for the board of directors to adopt the consent agenda as presented and only GP2E? Motion, can I get a motion for that? Director Corey, seconder, Director Baldinelli, any discussion? For voting, any objections? Any abstentions? All in favor? Passes 0-0-10. Now moving to the adoption of the meeting minutes of September 25th and October 2nd. Can I have a motion of the board of directors adopt the minutes of those two meetings? Director Hamilton, seconded by Director Sloan. Any discussion? And for voting,
Yes.
any objection?
Wait, just one quick
All right,
comment.
go ahead.
I'd like to thank the secretary of the board for their good the good minutes. The only thing that I would probably add is I understand that we are being the direction is to be concise, but they do need to be detailed enough so that they can give an accurate understanding of the context for our corporate records. So maybe a little bit less concise, but more just slightly more detailed, and attention to detail on like very small things like spelling. Just some minor spelling mistakes here and there. It's not that big of a deal, but otherwise, great effort. For this goes for these minutes and the previous minutes.
Yeah,
Yeah, so just to clarify, the role that the board has in improving the minutes is to catch spelling mistakes and to request more specific context if needed. So if there are errors that are noticed or specific items that you want more context included, the board can request those things. Those particular minutes would get then resubmitted to the next board meeting for approval.
okay, thank you for the clarification. Now to moving on to voting, any objections? Any abstention?
Are we voting on the adoptions there, or now we voting on these?
So, okay, so is there a motion to resubmit the minutes? Chair Abu Rashid, seconder.
Wait, no. Okay, I didn't mean to motion that. I just meant to say that the minutes are fine for today, but just that was more comments going forward.
Okay, so thank you for the clarification. So, just to clarify, this motion that has already been placed is just to keep the minutes as they are and for the secretary to take the comments into consideration moving forward. Now for voting on that original motion, is there any objections? Any abstentions? All those in favor? Passes 0-0 to 10. Now we'll move into comments from the chair of the board and CGO. So of course, I'm chairing the meeting for today, though I do have some comments from the chair and CGO. Firstly, to remind and to stress that email respondents for the board has still been poor, so make sure if you cannot attend a meeting, please make sure that you let us know. And if you are attending the meeting, please also let Orlin and the rest of the board know that you will be making it. Please consider that moving forward. The chair and the president have not been able to meet yet for the performance evaluation, but this will happen on Thursday. And the chair has stated that he has not yet been able to finish all the monitor reports, but continues to work hard on those when he is most available. That is all the comments that I have from him, but again, from me, thank you for coming to this meeting. Hopefully it will be quite short, and apologies for the miscommunication and mismanaging of the meeting earlier on. I'm trying to do my best. Now moving into comments from the president and CEO.
Awesome, thank you. So I'll be
Wait, you have an
ready.
unresolved question.
Oh.
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. You have an unresolved question.
Yeah, I just had a quick question about clarifying for the meeting in terms of letting either Orlan or like what's it called? Or Director Abu Rashid, in terms of attendance, are we just accepting the invitation, or do we need a full email response back saying I can confirm that I will be back or I'll be in attendance of the meeting? Just want to clarify.
To answer that question, I'm sure accepting the invitation is more than sufficient, as it is recorded down that you are available. So there's no need to write a full length email. If you wish to do so, then you can as well, but just accepting the invitation should be suffice.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
So, yeah,
And then just to add on to that, if you are sending regrets, regrets should be sent to the chair and then CC the governance coordinator, but they should be communicated to the chair directly, not to not specifically to Orland alone as governance coordinator.
Thank you for that specific clarification. If there are no more questions, move on to comments from the president and CEO.
Awesome. So yeah, like I said, a few random things. So the first thing is I just finished on a hiring panel for a manager of business development, and there's some other word in there for student affairs. So like super high level, it's someone who's going to take over their finances and make sure that student money is being spent in the best, most applicable ways. So that's really exciting. And the candidate was probably one of the smartest people I've ever talked to in real life. So like the candidate that they chose. So that was really encouraging. And we work really closely with student affairs, obviously. So that was great. Next weekend, we're hosting a conference here that we've been working very, very, very diligently to plan. So that's kind of been consuming a decent amount of time supporting the department that belongs to. With an update on Greek life, I know some people are interested in that. I've sent out an email to their president. We're just working back and forth between changes on the MOU, but hoping to get there pretty soon. In terms of C study, so there's a few changes going on there for the Center for Student Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. We're currently working to help finalize a job description for them to hire a new manager. And then the hiring committee for the AVP of EDI is also being moved forward. So a few different changes in that department. And finally, volunteer hiring for student volunteers was absolutely incredible. The numbers were insane. So that was really, really encouraging just to see students engaging with us. And obviously we filled our 2 spots as well. So that was encouraging as well. So it's really nice to see students engaging with us coming out of the pandemic. Yeah, does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, go ahead. Should we say?
Good question. Who are going to be the WLU delegates for the fall forum?
Can you repeat that, Mo? You were cutting out.
Yeah, so sorry, it's I'm in the middle of the area right now. Who are going to be the USA delegates for Ulusu?
Oh, yeah, so the USA delegates are, and for context, so the conference next weekend is put on by USA, which is Ontario Undergraduate Student Alliance. So I think there's 8 or 9 universities, give or take, that are coming, maybe 7. So we have 7 delegates, and essentially if you're a delegate, it means you, like super high level, they're working on 3 different policy papers to eventually reach the government level and hopefully result in institutional changes for the university. So there's 7 delegates, and being a delegate means that on Sunday at the plenary, which is a full day, you vote on changes to be made to the reports, if that makes sense. So our delegates are myself, Vivian, who's the VP of GSR, both of her AVPs, so Brody and Shio. Jordan, he has a Dawn on this campus and is in political science and just very interested in all things poli-sci. So he has recently been added. And then the 2 coordinators on the Brantford campus of SRAC and CAC. So Students' Rights Advisory Committee and Campus Advocacy Committee. So there's 7 of us and 3 Brantford, 4 Waterloo.
Yeah, Brantford boardroom, this question.
Yeah, okay. I had one question for on the VP Student Services Waterloo portfolio, specifically on ERT, about them shifting exclusively in the athletic complex. My understanding before is that they would be used kind of also for events and things like that. Has their kind of has their thing shifted to just working around the athletic complex, or is that just kind of a new sort of priority for them?
Yeah, so the root of that was that they, like, I need to put it blunt, they weren't being called at all. And it wasn't a very like enriching volunteer experience. So pretty much anyone who's on ERT that I've talked to has like the hope to go to medical school, or they're probably in some sort of science program, and they weren't really getting the experience that they thought they were going to get out of it, just because they weren't getting called a lot when they were located over there for patrol. So the VP this year, she was the foot patrol coordinator last year and was very close with the ERT coordinator, so kind of knew about all this and thought that they could be used in better spots. And the other parts of that as well is in intramurals, athletics was being slowed down by having to, like if someone got injured in the game, the referee would have to take that person to the side, fill out the form, and then the game would stop as the referee was doing that. So by ERT moving to athletics, it was kind of killing two birds with one stone in the sense that they weren't being used much over here, and then they were also helping athletics because they were helping their intramurals run smoother. So from what I've heard, there's been a lot of positive feedback from athletics, and it's helping them keep their games moving and keeping stuff on time, because like a lot of us know, they already run till like 1 a.m. So keeping them on track has been really positive for students because their games aren't going as long. So I would say it's a win-win, but the root of it was that they weren't being used as much as they wanted to, and the volunteers weren't getting a very fulfilling experience.
Okay, awesome.
Any other questions? From the board? As I see none, we move on to comments from the executive director and COO.
Yeah, so just a few things to update above and beyond what's already part of the agenda package. I didn't get the chance to say it, I'm sure somebody did. But we've hired an acting director of marketing communications, so we're really thrilled to be working with Ashley Atchison. She's dove headfirst into the department and is getting things kind of tightened up and back on track. As much as I would like to believe that President Spindler and myself did a great job supervising that department, doing that off the sides of our desk didn't do them or us justice. So we're really excited to have Ashley back in the fold, and we'll work with Andy and his team to kind of backfill her position because she comes to us from the hospitality department. Working through a VP finance job description project. We've gone through all of the VP and AVP job descriptions, trying to do an evaluation and try to clean those up and make them a little bit more professional and clear as to what the tasks are for those specific positions. We've gone through all of the interviews so far, and Sarah and her team will kind of continue to kind of take that to the next level. We're also in the process of working through some of our facility asset management challenges, more specifically the air handling unit project, as well as the chillers. The negotiations for those particular projects are quite passive at this point, but planning is quite active because we know a price tag is coming. So we're just trying to prepare for what that looks like and how we can kind of handle that while minimizing the financial impact on the organization and minimizing the impact on services for students. We're also in the process of working through the athletics and recreation sponsorship agreement. The board can look forward to having a brief outlining what that agreement is all about at the next board meeting. So it will come with a price tag north of 10K, albeit just north of 10K. So we will be looking for the board's approval to sign that agreement. We have, myself and President Spindler have a meeting this Thursday to continue our operating procedures agreement negotiations with the university. We have notes ready to go for essentially the agreement part of it, but the bulk of the work will come afterwards with all of the appendices, because the appendices are kind of how they outline all of the rules with interacting with university departments with the Students' Union on 2 and soon to be 3 campuses. Speaking of that, we also have our first meeting with the city of Milton on Wednesday this week to talk about transit for our incoming class in the September of 24. We are a long way from having anything effective for students on that campus for next year, but hopefully we'll be able to move fast and work with our partners at Conestoga College to kind of be able to reroute transit to have an effective transit strategy for our students in Milton in the fall of 24 and beyond. Just a quick update, it's probably in the ones that are in the agenda package, but Wilfs is very much back on track to pre-COVID numbers. We're actually very excited. They've had a really, really strong September and October so far. Last week, obviously being the exception because reading week. And the church also continues to be very busy with bookings for events because on the Waterloo campus here, there is a shortage of event space. So it gets to pick up a lot of the slack. So they're very, very busy up there. And lastly, over the course of reading week, we finished some of the upgrades to the FNCC. So the cartoon walls in that one northwest stairwell have come down and they've painted Students' Union blue as kind of accent walls as we go up that stairwell, as well as the front entrance of the FNCC has been upgraded with a paint job. That work will likely be ongoing as we try to keep it as clean and nice looking as possible, but everything looks great so far. So we're very pleased with what they've done, and that's about it.
Great, thank you very much. Are there any questions? Chair Burchett, go ahead.
2 questions. The first around the SU Does That campaign. Does that mean with more a better staff marketing campaign that we could, the operations is considering bringing back a pretty effective tool to reach our membership. And then the second question is in regards to the different agreements and negotiations with the university. What does your timeline look like on the air handling units, and the facilities upgrades in Waterloo, Brantford, and then finally with the SAAA? I know that these are very loaded questions, but
So I'm definitely gonna ask you to repeat some of the second part in a minute, but the first question was about the SU Does That marketing campaign. So if I remember correctly, I believe some board members were gonna meet with the marketing team to help kind of build out that campaign. But long story short, yes, now that Ashley's in position, I'm sure we can kind of rebuild that campaign and push it out to students. As for the second very full question, the SAAA has nothing to do with any of the air handling unit stuff, so I'm not sure which you want me to address first.
whatever in order. I mean, I'm just classifying this as negotiations.
Okay, so we met, myself and Chris Turner met with Lloyd Nerona, the VP Finance for the university, to kind of get his position on the air handling project. And he had only just learned of that project shortly before we'd met with him. So he had asked for a little bit more time to be able to digest that. We've since sent over the current operating procedures agreement and kind of advised him that it would probably be pertinent that he and his department kind of get well versed in it, because a majority of the appendices and the important things in that agreement are in his department. We've had some conversations where we disagreed with the facilities asset management team in terms of the the distribution of accountability to the money. But those aren't the people that are going to make those decisions. So we need to kind of get in Lloyd's ear, as well as potentially Deb's ear, about what the value is and what the responsibility of the students ought to be in that project. We had pretty extensive conversations with Dr. Joseph, the VP Student Affairs. He's very much on our side, but I'm not sure how much weight that carries in the senior leadership room when it comes to dollars and cents. So it's an ongoing process, but we haven't met with Lloyd in comfortably over a month at this point, I think. So Chris and I are in the process of kind of building out different scenarios of how we can kind of make this work if we need to make this work. Does that capture everything? I'm not sure I caught everything.
And then the SAAA and operating the what's the timeline on that?
So the OPA timeline is the end of the year. We obviously want to get that signed during this year's board calendar. The first step will be hopefully this Thursday, we can kind of come to some sort of at least tentative agreement on the actual agreement itself, but the appendices are going to be a lot of heavy lifting, and that likely won't go until, if we're best case scenario, late March, early April, because that's where the dollars and cents are, and that can get a little contentious with everybody. As for the SAAA, we're in the process. We literally had our first meeting with them on that today. Just trying to find out what's worked, what hasn't worked, what are the pain points, what are the successes of the first year of that agreement. I mean, honestly, we're only a month deep into the school year, so it's really hard to know exactly what the successes and challenges are of that agreement. But that timeline should be relatively quick, because a lot of those should be low-hanging fruit.
Okay, perfect. And do you think we'll come to a finalized longer-term deal by the end of the fiscal year?
For SAAA?
Yes.
That is not the intention. That agreement is a 5-year agreement divided into 1 year, 1 year, and then 3 years. So it's done that way by design because of how dramatically we changed that agreement. So we will re-up for 1 more year. And then next year, we'll kind of try to tighten it up even more if it needs tightening up. And then if we sign off on that 1 year, then it becomes a 3-year agreement, and then we won't have to worry about it until, I think that's 2027. But yeah, we should be fine.
Cool. Awesome. Glad to hear that there are progress on the negotiations. Thank you so much.
Great. Are there any other questions to the director campaign? As I see none, we can move on to 2023-2024 election briefing policy and general meeting and elections.
Yes, so you have a briefing note with a couple components. There are some proposed policy changes, and then there's a general elections timeline with a broad overview of some initiatives from pretty much now until the election period. So there are two specific motions that the board needs to make tonight. The first one is to set the campaign and voting period dates. And then the second is to adopt the 2024 election policy. So we can perhaps start with the election period dates. So you'll notice the second page of the briefing note, what we're proposing this year is slightly shortening the campaign period. So the campaign period would run from January 22nd to January 30th. And then voting dates would be January 30th, beginning at 8 a.m. in the morning until February 1st, concluding at 8 p.m. And you'll see some allusion to what the extra time will be used for post break. Essentially, it will give more opportunity for candidates to declare and submit nomination packages, as well as the governance coordinator has some pretty substantive ideas for doing some pre-election marketing. And for context, last year, we essentially concentrated our marketing of the elections into the last week and a bit of the campaign to kind of soft launch the idea. The feedback that we've received over the last number of years is that the 2.5 or 2+ weeks period is just a little bit too long when to hold people's attention and while as from a time commitment standpoint for candidates. So the operational recommendation at this point for this year is to run with that shortened period to allow from some additional events and promotion ahead of the actual campaign period. There's some time built in for getting election material pre-approved before the campaigning to kind of minimize some of the scramble that candidates have faced in the past, and then proceed with the normal 3 days of voting. So just perhaps dealing with the first motion, it would be to approve a campaign period from January 22nd to January 30th, and then 3 full days of voting, January 30th to February 1st. So happy to answer any questions on behalf of the governance coordinator and myself.
So we'll start with a question from the Brantford board. But
I may just be totally misremembering, but last year, was it that the campaign period ended mid-January? Was that what it was last year?
Essentially, we're always, I think it was pretty closely aligned. It's always kind of right at the tail end of January, depending on where the February 1st hits. So the end of the campaign period is the same, which is generally required for some of our hiring procedures and processes. So the timing on the back end hasn't changed. It's just trimming it a little bit down from when things get going on the start.
Okay, because yeah, that's what my question was going to be, was how does that affect executive hiring? But I think that answers that.
are you able to share what some of the proposed marketing ideas the governance coordinator had?
So they're beyond what's in the overview and the brief, they're still kind of at the conception stage, but essentially a lot more kind of in-person touch points to let people know. The plan is to have some of those election team volunteers doing some kind of active boothing late November, early December to get people aware of what's happening. We're hopefully going to pair that with some similar promotions about the executive hiring. So having both of those groups together physically on campus in Waterloo and Brantford to spread the word about those opportunities, and then some time when people come back from the winter break to remind them, and then give them some time to get their nomination packages complete, to figure out, because oftentimes we have a lot of people who decide last minute, and with tight timelines returning to campus, you tend to miss some people who may otherwise have been interested. So just some flexibility to give some more time. And then depending on the size of the election team, a lot of in-person presence, chatting with people, letting them know about those opportunities.
Right. Are there any more questions? As I see none, can I get a motion then to accept the proposed policy changes?
This would just be the dates.
Particularly for the date of the election period. Director Sloan, can I get seconded by Director Corey? Is there any discussion? So now all those, are there any objections? Any abstentions? All in favor? Vote passes 0-0 to 10. So is there more?
Yeah, so the second motion required is to approve the 2024 elections policy. So in the package is the 2023 election policy. They're just four pretty straightforward changes to update that policy for 2024. Two of them are in your package, so it's changing point 13.1.1. Active campaigning will commence at 9 a.m. on the first day of elections as communicated in the nomination packages and end a half hour prior to the opening and polling. So that's just used to be that the all candidates meeting would end and campaigning would immediately start. This year, the idea is to have a bit of a gap for some campaign pre-approval. So the nomination packages would have that official start date of campaigning, but it gives you a little bit of time for people to order materials or to get things sorted out prior to the campaign period actually starting, which that new timeline gives us some flexibility to do. And then it would be adding in section 15 under promotional materials, adding in a section, it would be that candidates may submit promotional materials for early approval after the all candidates meeting prior to the campaign period, but not release them or officially begin campaigning until active campaigning begins. So that's part and parcel with the initial policy change, again, dealing with that little bit of flexibility. And then the two other changes are more very minor. So in 3.2, when it talks about referendum questions must be submitted no less than 5 business days prior to the last regularly scheduled board meeting in November. Just a simple change from November to December. Our last board meeting is December 11th. So that timeline will be set just with a little bit of different timeline. And then the other minor change is in section 5. So last year we passed referendum questions to clarify our process, the Ontario Not-for-Profit Corporations Act. So annual general meetings are now annual meetings. And in 5.1, that point will read now the annual meeting of the members of the Students' Union shall be held in person immediately prior to the announcement of the election results. And then in 5.2 and 5.3, just a simple strike of the word general because the terminology is now annual meeting. And essentially what will happen this year is in order to properly meet our requirements under that act, we actually have to have a physical meeting where there's some very straightforward business done. Probably won't take more than about 10 or 15 minutes. So we're going to do that on results night right before we give results. So be able to meet quorum for the annual meeting. We'll be able to meet our requirements under the act. Largely a very procedural thing. We just have to kind of enter it in. So we're just updating the policy to reflect that.
Right, and then those in-person events would both be at Brantford and Waterloo?
So the in-person before the election results night, that would be in Waterloo. And we would figure out how to get people down, but it requires a very small number of students to pass that part. All the substantive business is done through the election. It's essentially certifying the election.
Right, so just before propose the motion, are there any other questions on what was just discussed? Brantford border, is that a question? No, not a question. Okay, so can I get a motion to accept the 2024 election policy as with the proposed changes? Director Corey, seconded by Director Hamilton. Is there any discussion? And are an objection? Any abstentions? All those in favor? Motion passes 0-0 to 10. That is everything with that.
Correct,
right?
yes.
Okay. We do have time to go in camera, so can I get a motion that the board of directors proceed to an in-camera session? Director Russo seconded, seconded by Director Hamilton. Any discussion? No. Any objections? Any abstentions? All those in favor? Okay, motion passes 0-0 to